Welcome to Narrative Oasis. Have you ever felt a sudden chill in a warm room, or heard a whisper when no one else was there? Tonight we're diving deep into the shadows, exploring stories that will make you question what's real and what's lurking just beyond our sight. These aren't just spooky tales, they're terrifyingly true ghost encounters that people just like you have experienced. From disembodied voices in empty houses to spectral figures appearing in the dead of night, we're sharing accounts that are so chilling, you won't believe they actually happened. So, turn down the lights, get comfortable, and prepare to be spooked. Here are some real encounters with the other side. If you enjoy these stories, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Story number 1. Hi, my name is Anya, and for 2 years, I was a live-in nanny for the Hargrove family. Their estate was nestled deep in the Berkshire Mountains, a sprawling Gothic revival mansion that looked like it was pulled from the pages of a dark fairy tale. It was beautiful, yes, but also deeply isolated. Miles of dense, silent forest separated us from the nearest town. The house itself was a labyrinth of echoing halls, shadowed corners, and rooms that hadn't been opened in decades. My charge was a sweet little girl named Lily, just 5 years old. Her parents, the Hargroves, were kind but perpetually absent, always jetting off to some international conference or business meeting. That left just me, Lily, and the sprawling, quiet house. My story isn't about the loneliness though, it's about a door. Specifically, the lockless door, as I came to call it. It was in the nursery, a small, unassuming wooden door that led to a shallow closet on the 3rd floor. And it had one very peculiar habit: it would not stay shut. At first I didn't think much of it. I'd tuck Lily in, close the closet door, and in the morning I'd find it ajar. Just a draft, Mr. Hargrove had said with a dismissive wave of his hand before one of his trips. Old houses have their quirks, so I'd just close it and go about my day, but it kept happening. Every single morning, without fail, the door would be open. Not just slightly ajar, but swung wide, as if someone had deliberately opened it during the night. It started to unnerve me. I checked the latch, it seemed to catch just fine. I made sure it clicked every night. Still, morning would come, and the door would be open. The house was old, sure, but it wasn't drafty. The air was still heavy. One evening, after Lily was asleep, I decided to take it a step further. I found an old bolt in the maintenance shed and, with a bit of effort, I installed it on the nursery closet door. That night, I closed the door, clicked the latch, and slid the heavy iron bolt into place. I felt a sense of triumph. Let's see a draft get past that, I whispered to myself. The next morning, I walked into the nursery and my heart dropped into my stomach. The door was wide open, the latch was undone, and the bolt was slid back, resting silently in its housing. There was no scratch on the wood, no sign of force. It was just open. A cold dread, heavy and real, began to seep into me. This wasn't the house settling. This wasn't the wind. My days with Lily were a strange mix of sunshine and shadow. We'd play in the vast gardens, her laughter echoing in the unnervingly quiet air. But sometimes, she'd stop and look up at the 3rd floor nursery window with a distant expression. One afternoon while we were painting, she started talking in that stream of consciousness way kids do. She told me about her friend, the quiet man. She said he lived in the closet and would watch her sleep. He's very tall and thin, she said, dabbing red paint onto her paper, and he just watches. He doesn't say anything. I tried to brush it off as an imaginary friend, a common thing for a lonely child, but the way she described him with such simple, chilling certainty made my skin crawl. My unease grew into a quiet, constant hum of fear. I started bracing the door at night. After locking and bolting it, I'd wedge a heavy upholstered armchair from the corner of the room under the knob. The first morning I did that, I walked in with bated breath. The chair was exactly where I'd left it, pressed tight against the door. I let out a sigh of relief, but then I looked up. The door was wide open. The chair was still wedged under the knob, but the door had somehow opened inward, through the chair, which should have been impossible. It defied logic, defied physics. My mind just couldn't process it. The house was playing tricks on me. It had to be. Every morning became a ritual of dread. I would walk up the grand staircase, my steps slowing as I approached the nursery, my heart pounding against my ribs. And every morning the same sight would greet me. The bolt slid back, the latch undone, the door peacefully, impossibly, open. The Hargroves were unreachable, off on a yacht somewhere in the Mediterranean. I was alone with this thing. I couldn't take it anymore. My 2 years were almost up, and on my final night I decided I needed proof. I needed to know what was happening, even if the answer was terrifying. I had to prove to myself that I wasn't going crazy. After tucking Lily into her bed, her breathing soft and even in the dim light of her nightlight, I began my preparations. I closed the closet door, clicked the latch, slid the heavy bolt. Then, I dragged the armchair and wedged it firmly under the knob. Finally, I took my phone and propped it up on Lily's dresser, angling it so the entire door was in frame. I hit record. I pulled a second chair into the hallway, just outside Lily's room, leaving her door slightly ajar so I could watch the closet door. I sat there in the dark, the silence of the massive house pressing in on me. Hours passed, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. The moonlight cast long distorted shadows down the hall. My eyes burned from staring at the sliver of door I could see. Nothing happened. The house was silent. My rational mind started to take over. Maybe it was all in my head. Maybe tonight, the one night I record, nothing will happen. Exhaustion finally won. My head drooped, and against my will, I drifted into a restless sleep right there in the chair. I woke with a start to the pale gray light of dawn. My neck was stiff, my body cold. My first thought was the door. I scrambled to my feet and pushed open the nursery door. The armchair was moved. It had been dragged several feet to the side, the fabric leaving faint trails on the polished wood floor, and the closet door stood wide open. My hands were shaking as I retrieved my phone. I sank onto the floor, my back against the wall, and hit play. The first few hours of the video were just as I remembered, a static, silent shot of the door. Then, at around 3:15 a.m., it happened. There was no sound, but I saw it. The iron bolt on the door began to move. It slid back, slowly, mechanically, with an unnatural smoothness. Then the doorknob turned. The latch clicked open, an audible sound on the recording that I hadn't heard from the hall. The most terrifying part came next. The armchair, the heavy, solid armchair, began to move. It didn't shake or jostle. It slid across the floor silently, as if pushed by an unseen, careful hand, clearing a path. My breath hitched. Then, the closet door swung inward. But what the camera revealed wasn't the dark, shallow closet I knew. It was a void. A deep, impossible, starless blackness that seemed to absorb the light from the room. It was an abyss where a closet should be. I watched, frozen in horror, as something emerged from that pitch-black void. It was a hand, long, impossibly thin, and pale, like bleached bone. The fingers were like spider legs, skeletal and delicate. The hand reached out and grasped the edge of the doorframe, its grip steady and possessive. And that's where the video ended. My phone had run out of battery. I didn't scream. I couldn't. The sound was trapped in my throat. I grabbed my bag, threw my few belongings into it, and ran. I didn't even look back at Lily, sleeping peacefully in her bed. I just ran out of that house, into the dawn, and I didn't stop until the estate was a speck in my rearview mirror. A week later, my phone rang. It was Mrs. Hargrove. Her voice sounded strained, distant. She wasn't calling to ask why I'd left. She was calling to ask if I had, by any chance, taken a small silver locket from the nursery. "It's just the strangest thing," she said. "We've never seen it before, but Lily is inconsolable. She won't stop crying. She insists it belongs to the quiet man." I told her I had no idea what she was talking about and hung up. I never saw them again. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still see it. That pale, thin hand, gripping the doorframe, an invitation accepted. And I know deep in my soul that the door in the nursery isn't closed. It's waiting. Thanks for listening to my story. If you have your own chilling experiences, share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. Stay safe out there. Story number 2. For 15 years, my life was the white line of the highway, my only real home, the cab of my big rig. I'm Mark, and I thought I'd seen it all out there. Every sunrise over the Rockies, every midnight storm in the Midwest. But you drive enough miles, you eventually see something that makes you question every single one of them. Something that makes you wonder if the empty road is ever really empty. My story, the one I don't tell at truck stops, happened on a stretch of Route 90 in West Texas. If you've ever driven it, you know what I'm talking about. It's so barren out there, it feels like another planet. Just you, the asphalt, and a sky so big it can swallow you whole. The heat warps the air, making the horizon dance, and the silence is so deep it has a sound of its own. I'd been pushing for about 12 hours straight, fueled by cheap coffee and the low hum of the engine. My eyelids felt like sandpaper. I needed a break, even a short one, just to stretch my legs and splash some water on my face. Up ahead I saw the sign for a rest stop. It wasn't one of the big modern ones. This was an old-timer, probably built back in the 50s and forgotten by time. Pulling in, the loneliness of the place hit me harder than the fatigue. It was just a cracked concrete pad, weeds pushing through the gaps, and a single light pole, its lamp long dead. The only sound was the wind, whistling a low, mournful tune across the desert. I killed the engine, and the silence that rushed in was absolute. I remember thinking it was so quiet, you could probably hear a thought. I wish I hadn't thought that. I leaned my head back against the seat, closing my eyes for just a second. That's when I heard it. A soft tap on my passenger side window. Tap, tap, gentle, almost polite. I figured it was just the wind kicking up some gravel or maybe a branch from a scraggly mesquite bush. I didn't even bother opening my eyes at first. Tap, tap, tap. A little more insistent this time. All right. Now I was annoyed. I opened my eyes, ready to shoo away whatever stray animal was bothering me. But it wasn't an animal. Standing right there, inches from my window, was a woman. The first thing I noticed was her dress. It was a wedding dress. Or it had been. Now it was torn, stained with mud, and clinging to her like a second skin, as if she'd been caught in a downpour. But it wasn't raining. The desert air was bone dry. Her hair was plastered to her face, and her eyes were a mess of despair. They were wide, pleading, and locked right onto mine. She looked like she'd just walked out of a nightmare. My heart hammered against my ribs. Out here, in the middle of nowhere, at this hour, it made no sense. My first instinct, my trucker instinct, is to help. Stranded motorist maybe, an accident. I reached for the window crank, my hand shaking a little. But before I could move, her expression changed. The gentleness vanished. Her face contorted in a mask of pure, frantic desperation. She started pounding on the glass, no longer tapping. Her fists hammered against the window, but there was no sound. I could see her mouth moving, forming words, maybe even screaming them, but it was all completely silent. It was like watching a movie with the sound turned off. The silence was more terrifying than any scream could have been. That's when the real fear kicked in. This wasn't a stranded driver. This was something else. My training, my logic, everything screamed at me to get out of there. I fumbled for the door locks, jamming the button down. The click echoed in the cab, loud and final. I didn't dare look at her again. I jammed the key into the ignition and twisted. The engine roared to life, shattering the unnatural quiet. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the dead light pole and the endless desert beyond. I threw the truck into gear, my foot slamming down on the accelerator. The rig lurched forward, tires spinning on the loose gravel before catching hold. I didn't look in the passenger mirror. I didn't want to see her. I just wanted miles between me and that rest stop. I pulled back onto the highway, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I drove for a minute, then two, the rhythm of the road slowly starting to calm my frayed nerves. It was a crazy person, I told myself, just some poor soul, lost and confused. I did the right thing. Then my headlights caught something up ahead. A figure, standing in the middle of my lane. My blood ran cold. It was her, the woman in the wedding dress. She was just standing there, one arm outstretched, pointing off the road, into the blackness of the desert. I swerved, the truck groaning in protest, the trailer fishtailing behind me. I narrowly missed her, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. How did she get in front of me? I was doing 60. It was impossible. I looked in my rearview mirror. The road behind me was empty. She was gone. I kept driving faster now, pushing the engine harder. I had to get to the next town. 2 people, 2 lights, but every few miles, there she was again. First in my headlights, then just on the edge of the road, then further in the distance, a ghostly white figure against the dark landscape. And every single time she was pointing, always pointing in the same direction, off the highway into the sprawling empty desert. She never chased me. She was just there, guiding me. It wasn't a request anymore. It was a demand. And the truly terrifying part, a feeling was starting to grow in my mind. Not my own thought, but something being pushed into it. An image, a feeling of being trapped, of water rising, of a sudden brutal stop. It was her message, and it wasn't one I could hear with my ears. It was a story she was pouring directly into my consciousness. I fought it. I tried to focus on the road, on the music from the radio, on anything, but the image grew stronger, the feeling of her desperation becoming my own. I felt her panic, her last moments, and with it, a pull, an undeniable urge to turn the wheel. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe I just couldn't take it anymore. But I slowed the truck, pulled over onto the shoulder, and with a sense of dread that felt like a physical weight, I turned off the pavement. The big rig bumped and rattled over the uneven ground, my headlights carving a path into the scrubland. I was following her direction. I was on an unwilling pilgrimage. She guided me, not with her physical presence anymore, but with that feeling, that image in my head. Turn here, go past that strange rock formation. head towards that dip in the land. I drove for what felt like an eternity, deeper and deeper into the wilderness, until the feeling in my head screamed, "Stop." I was in a washed-out arroyo, a dry riverbed carved by flash floods. I put the truck in neutral and flipped on my high beams. The powerful light sliced through the night, illuminating the sandy basin before me, and there it was, half buried in the sand and debris, tilted at a sickening angle, was the sunken wreck of a car. A vintage car, maybe a 60s model, its classic fins sticking out of the ground like a tombstone. The roof was crushed, the windows gone. It had clearly been there for a very, very long time, and I knew with an absolute, bone-deep certainty that defied all logic. I knew her bones were still inside. This was where she had died. This was what she had been trying to show me all night. I sat there, in the cab of my truck, the engine idling, my high beams turning the wreck into a ghastly stage. The wind howled through the arroyo, and for the first time it didn't sound empty. It sounded like a scream. I didn't get out. I backed the truck up, slowly, carefully, my eyes never leaving the wreck until it was swallowed by the darkness again. I found my way back to the highway and drove until the sun came up, never stopping, never looking back. A few days later, from a payphone hundreds of miles away, I made an anonymous tip to the Texas Highway Patrol. I told them about a dream I'd had, about a vintage car wreck in an arroyo off Route 90. I gave them the approximate location. It was the best I could do. Weeks turned into months. I deliberately changed my routes, avoiding West Texas, avoiding long empty stretches of desert at night. Then, one day, in a greasy spoon diner in Arizona, I saw a small article in a local paper. It was about a cold case being solved. The remains of a woman, who had disappeared on her wedding day 40 years prior, had been found in a car wreck uncovered by recent erosion. She'd been found thanks to an anonymous tip. I folded the newspaper and left it on the table. I had my confirmation. I was finished. I sold my rig. I couldn't drive the long haul anymore. But now, every time I see an empty highway at night, I can't help but wonder who, or what, might be standing just beyond the reach of the headlights, pointing the way. Thanks for listening. If you liked this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more. Story number 3. My name is Leo, and I'm an archaeologist. My life's work is to unearth secrets the earth has kept buried for centuries, to give a voice to the long-forgotten dead. But some secrets I've learned are better left undisturbed, and some voices should remain silent forever. It all started on a dig in the windswept Scottish Highlands. The air was crisp, tasting of peat and ancient rain. Our team was buzzing with energy. We'd found a burial site pre-Christian, which is always a significant find. The skeleton was remarkably preserved, laid out in a shallow grave lined with stones. Everything was textbook until we brushed the dirt from its chest. Resting on the ribcage was a small figurine, carved from a dark, porous stone. It was crude, almost childish in its execution, a misshapen humanoid form with deep-set empty eye sockets and a lipless slash for a mouth. It was unsettlingly ugly, yet there was a deliberateness to its placement that felt ritualistic, important. I documented it, photographed it, and was about to bag it as evidence when our local consultant, an old historian named Alistair, came over. His face, usually rosy from the Highland wind, went pale as ash. He stared at the figurine in my hand, his eyes wide with a fear I'd never seen in him. "Put it back," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Leo, for God's sake, put it back," I chuckled, dismissing his alarm. "What is it, Alistair? Some local superstition?" He shook his head, refusing to even look at it directly. "It's a bright heme doll," he said, the Gaelic word rolling uneasily off his tongue. "A judge's doll. It's not a totem. It's a prison. You don't want to be the one who opens the door. A prison for a malicious entity. That's what he called it." Me, a man of science and reason, found the idea absurdly romantic. A morbid souvenir, I thought. A great story to tell back at the university. Against Alistair's frantic protests, I slipped the stone doll into my jacket pocket. Its rough surface felt strangely cold against my fingers, colder than the damp Highland air. That was my first mistake. That night, back in the silence of my rented cottage, the doll began its work. The fire crackled in the hearth, a lonely sound against the howling wind outside. I had placed the figurine on the mantelpiece, where its dark form seemed to absorb the firelight. As I drifted off to sleep, my dreams were vivid. I found myself in a courtroom made of shifting gray stone. There was a judge's bench, a witness stand, and a jury box, all empty. Yet, I felt countless eyes on me, a heavy, expectant silence pressing in. I woke up with my heart pounding. The image of that stone room seared into my mind. The next day, things started to get weird. It began with small, bizarre accidents. My morning coffee spilled, scalding my hand, even though I was sure I had placed the mug securely in the center of the table. A crucial research book fell from a high shelf, its pages landing open on a chapter detailing historical methods of torture. Later, while driving back from the dig site, a large bird struck my windshield with such force it left a spiderweb of cracks right in my line of sight. Each incident on its own was explainable, a coincidence, but strung together, they felt personal, they felt intentional. The haunting wasn't in the cottage, it was in me. It escalated from physical mishaps to a full-blown psychological assault. It started with whispers, a low, gravelly voice, like stones grinding together, echoing in the quiet moments. It didn't speak of ghosts or demons, it spoke of me. It listed my regrets, my private shames, things no one else could possibly know. A lie I told a mentor to get ahead, a promise I broke to someone I loved. The time I plagiarized a paragraph in a minor university paper, a secret I thought I'd taken to my grave. The voice dredged it all up, laying my soul bare in the darkness of the cottage. Then, physical objects in my room began to rearrange themselves. One morning I woke up to find all my loose change meticulously arranged on the floor in the shape of a broken heart, a cruel reminder of a past relationship I'd ended callously. Another time my research notes were scattered, forming the initials of a colleague whose work I'd unfairly criticized out of professional jealousy. It was a surgical, meticulous haunting. The doll wasn't just trying to scare me, it was judging me. It had put me on trial in that stone courtroom of my dreams, and it was presenting the evidence. Desperation took hold, I had to get rid of it. One night, under a sliver of a moon, I drove to the deepest part of the local lock. My hands trembled as I took the stone figurine from my pocket. Its empty eyes seemed to stare right through me. With a cry of frustration and fear, I hurled it as far as I could into the black, freezing water. It vanished with a faint plop. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was over. I drove back to the cottage, the first real peace I'd felt in days settling over me. I walked into my bedroom, exhausted, and my heart stopped. There, on my pillow, was the judge's doll. It was bone dry, not a single drop of water on it. Panic set in. The next day I built a roaring fire in the hearth, much bigger than usual. I threw the doll into the heart of the flames. I watched as the stone began to glow red, then white hot. A strange, acrid smell filled the room, the scent of burning rock and something else, something ancient and malevolent. I stayed there for hours, feeding the fire until the doll was nothing but a charred, blackened lump. I swept the ashes into a tin and buried them deep in the garden. But the smell of burnt stone never left. It clung to my clothes, my skin, my hair. No matter how many times I showered, it was there. It was in every room of the cottage. It was in my food, my water. And worse, the voice was no longer a whisper. It was a constant, grating presence in my head, reciting my sins, my failures, its tone dripping with condemnation. The trial was over. The verdict was in. Guilty. And now, I understood its goal. It wasn't going to kill me. It wasn't going to drive me insane in the privacy of this cottage. It wanted something more. It wanted a public confession. The voice made its demand clear, focusing on one specific transgression from my early career. A significant mistake I made on a dig, an error in dating an artifact that I deliberately covered up. Admitting it would be professional suicide. My reputation, my tenure, everything I had worked my entire life for, would be destroyed. The entity, this judge, didn't want my life. It wanted my life's work. It wanted me to tear down my own legacy. So here I am. The doll is gone, but its judgment remains, a permanent resident in my mind. The gravelly voice is my constant companion. The smell of burning stone is the only air I breathe. I'm left with a devastating choice. Do I keep my career, my reputation, and live with this relentless, surgical torment until it finally shatters my sanity? Or do I stand before my peers, my students, the world, and confess my oldest, most damaging secret, sacrificing everything I am for a moment of silence, my career or my mind? The judge is. Thanks for listening to my story. If you have your own chilling experiences, share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. Stay safe out there. Story number 4. My name is Claire. Grief does strange things to you. It makes you cling to things, to memories, to objects, anything to feel a connection to the person you lost. After my grandmother's funeral, everyone was picking through her belongings, taking little mementos. I only wanted one thing, her favorite piece of furniture. It was this beautiful, ornate, full-length Victorian mirror that stood in her bedroom for as long as I could remember. It was tall and imposing, framed in dark, intricately carved wood vines and flowers twisting around the edges. Getting it back to my apartment was a struggle, but once it was there, standing in the corner of my bedroom, it felt right. It felt like I had a piece of her with me, watching over me. I'd often stand in front of it, remembering her. I'd see her in my mind's eye, a kind, gentle woman with a warm smile, adjusting her hair in this very mirror. For the first few weeks, it was a source of immense comfort. I'd talk to it, telling my grandma about my day, just like I used to on the phone. It was my way of coping, or so I thought. Then, the rules started to change. It began subtly. I'd walk past the mirror and feel a sudden, inexplicable cold spot, like a pocket of winter air trapped right in front of the glass. I'd dismiss it as a draft, even though my windows were sealed tight. Then came the smells. A faint, fleeting scent of her perfume, lavender and old lace, would drift through the room, even though I didn't own anything that smelled like it. These were small things, deniable things. I told myself it was just my grief playing tricks on my mind, my senses trying to conjure her presence because I missed her so much. The reflection was the next thing to go wrong. Sometimes, when I'd glance at it from the corner of my eye, my reflection would seem off, warped. For a split second, my arm would look too long, or my head would be tilted at an impossible angle. But when I'd turn to look directly, everything was normal. Then, it got more personal. I'd smile, and my reflection would hold the expression just a moment too long after my own face had relaxed. I'd turn away, and I'd have the unshakable feeling that the eyes in the mirror were still watching me. The denial shattered one Tuesday night. I was getting ready for bed, brushing my teeth in the bathroom, when I walked back into my bedroom. I glanced at the mirror out of habit, and my heart stopped. My blood ran ice cold. Staring back at me was my reflection. But it wasn't me. It was standing perfectly still, even though I had just walked into the room. It was me, but not me. Its face was a mask of pure, vicious hatred. The eyes were narrowed, filled with a malice I had never seen before. It wasn't my sweet, loving grandma, and it certainly wasn't me. It was a young woman, maybe my age, wearing my face like a costume, and she looked like she wanted to tear the world apart. I blinked, and it was gone. It was just my own terrified face staring back. But I couldn't unsee it. The terror was absolute, a frozen scream trapped in my chest. After that night, sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. I started researching, desperate for an explanation. I spent hours online, digging into the history of Victorian spirit, mirrors, old superstitions, anything. Then, I remembered a box of my grandmother's old photo albums I'd taken. I tore through them, my hands shaking. Deep in a dusty album from the 1920s, I found it. A faded photograph of the mirror, standing in a different house. Posing beside it was a young woman who looked eerily like me. But it wasn't my grandmother. A handwritten note on the back read, Lillian, 1928, Lillian, my grandmother's aunt. I vaguely remembered hearing whispers about her when I was a child. They said she was troubled, that she'd vanished under mysterious, scandalous circumstances. The family never spoke of her. The haunting became interactive. The reflection wasn't just a passive observer anymore. It was an active participant. It started moving on its own. While I was sitting on my bed reading, I'd see my reflection in the mirror stand up and walk to the edge of the glass, its face pressed against the surface, trying to get a better look at me. It would mouth words I couldn't hear, its expression a twisted mix of pleading and threatening. One afternoon, it slowly raised its hand and pointed directly at the bedroom door, as if suggesting I leave, or that it wanted to. I tried to fight back. I draped a heavy blanket over the mirror, but the moment I did, all hell broke loose. The lights in my apartment flickered violently. The drawers of my dresser were yanked open and slammed shut. Objects flew off my shelves, smashing against the walls. The poltergeist activity was so intense, so violent, I was forced to rip the blanket off. The instant the glass was uncovered, everything stopped. The room fell silent. It wanted to see. It needed to see. My next idea was to get it out of my house. I called 2 friends, telling them I was redecorating and needed help moving a heavy piece of furniture. The moment they stepped into the bedroom, a wave of nausea hit both of them. One of them said the air was so heavy he could barely breathe. As they tried to lift the mirror, it wouldn't budge. It was as if it were bolted to the floor, rooted to the very foundations of the building. They strained, their knuckles white, but it was useless. They left, confused and unnerved, leaving me alone with it once more. That's when I finally understood. Some heirlooms aren't gifts, they're transfers. My grandmother hadn't just kept a haunted mirror, she had been its keeper, and now I was its keeper. Lillian wasn't trapped in the mirror. She was using it as a door, a gateway between her world and mine. And with every passing day, she was getting closer to opening it completely. I could feel her, a constant, pressing presence at the edge of my reality. I knew I couldn't live like this. The fear was eating me alive. I had one last, desperate idea. There would be no more running, no more covering it up. I had to face it. That night I pulled a chair in front of the mirror. In my hand I clutched a heavy steel hammer from my toolbox. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the suffocating silence. I sat down, my eyes locked with my own reflection. For a long time, nothing happened. It was just me and my own terrified face. Then, slowly, the reflection began to change. The features sharpened, the eyes hardened, and the hateful sneer I'd seen before crept across its lips. It mimicked my posture, the hammer in its hand a perfect copy of mine. It leaned forward, and I leaned forward, until our faces were inches from the cold glass. I could feel her rage, her desperation, pouring through the glass like a physical force. And then, the impossible happened. The reflection. It peeled itself away from the glass. It wasn't a reflection anymore. It was three-dimensional, a solid form detaching from the mirrored surface. Its movements slick and unnatural, like pulling wet fabric from a wall. It was stepping out. Solid cold presence began to manifest in the room, the air dropping 20 degrees. Just as its foot touched the carpet of my bedroom, a foot that was mine but not mine, I screamed. A raw, primal sound of pure terror. I swung the hammer with every ounce of strength I had. The sound of shattering glass was like an explosion, echoing through the apartment. The mirror imploded, a spiderweb of cracks erupting from the point of impact before the entire pane cascaded to the floor in 1,000 glittering shards. In the sudden ringing silence, the cold presence was gone. The air in the room felt light again, clean. Lillian was gone. I sat there for hours, surrounded by the wreckage, shaking. I had one, but I haven't had a peaceful night's sleep since. Sometimes when I'm alone, I feel it. A cold breath on the back of my neck, a flicker of movement in my peripheral vision. I'd got rid of the mirror, but a new, paranoid fear has taken root in my soul. I didn't trap her out by destroying the door. I just set her completely and irrevocably free in my world. And now, she could be anywhere, or in any reflection. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more content like this. Stay safe out there. Story number 5. My name is David. I used to be an overnight security guard. If you've never done it, let me tell you, it's a job built on silence and repetition. You learn the personality of a building. Every groaning pipe, every sigh from the HVAC system, every distant rumble of the elevator. You become part of its nocturnal rhythm. For me, that building was the Granville Tower, a gleaming 40-story monument to corporate ambition. For months it was just me and the quiet hum of electronics, a predictable mind-numbing waltz. And then, my routine wasn't just broken, it was shattered into a million terrified pieces by the man on the monitor. It started on a Tuesday, I remember, because my coffee was extra bitter that night. I was doing my hourly sweep of the camera feeds, my eyes glazing over the familiar, empty offices. Floor 12, all clear. Floor 13, nothing. Floor 14, I stopped. There, in the middle of the marketing department's open-plan office, was a man. He was sitting at a desk, perfectly still, wearing a pristine gray suit. His hands were folded on the tabletop, and he was just staring, not at the camera, but straight ahead, into the darkness of the empty office. My heart hammered against my ribs. Protocol is clear. Unauthorized presence. You call it in. You investigate. But my own eyes told me the floor was empty. I had just checked the access logs. No one had entered the building since the cleaning crew left at 10. No one had used the elevators. I zoomed in, but his face was a strange, indistinct smear, like a thumbprint on a lens. I grabbed my maglite and radioed my supervisor, my voice trying hard to sound steady. Dispatch, this is Granville Tower. I have a possible unauthorized individual on the 14th floor. The response was clipped, professional. Stay at your post, David. We're sending a patrol car to assist, but I couldn't just sit there. I had to know. I took the service elevator up, my footsteps echoing in the cavernous silence. The 14th floor was as still and empty as a tomb. I walked through the entire space, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom, checking under every desk, in every closet. Nothing, not a footprint, not a single disturbed piece of paper. The desk he'd been sitting at was cold to the touch. I went back down to my station, my mind reeling. The police arrived, We did a full sweep, top to bottom. They found nothing. They looked at me with that familiar mix of pity and annoyance cops reserve for what they think is a false alarm. My supervisor, a guy named Henderson, called me. "You sure you weren't dozing off, David?" I insisted. I replayed the footage. There he was. The cops watched it, rewound it, watched it again. They were spooked, but without a body there was nothing to do. They filed a report and left me alone in the silent tower. The next night I was on edge. My eyes were glued to the monitors. The hours ticked by. Midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. Then, at exactly 2:17 a.m. he appeared. This time he was on the 28th floor, finance. Same man, same pristine gray suit, same blank stare, same blurred face. I didn't call it in this time. I just watched, my blood turning to ice. The next night, 2:17 a.m., he was on the 7th floor, then the 35th. Always at 2:17 a.m., always a different floor, a silent, static phantom in the machine. I started documenting everything. I saved the video clips. I wrote down the times, the locations. I presented it all to Henderson. He looked through my logs, his face tightening. "David," he said, his voice low, "I think you need to take some time off. The stress of this job, it can play tricks on you." He wasn't listening. He thought I was cracking up, that I was seeing things. The company couldn't afford a scandal about a haunted building. They were trying to manage me, not the problem. That's when things started to escalate. The figure wasn't just static anymore. One night, at 2:17 a.m., he appeared on the 19th floor, and he stood up. He walked slowly, deliberately, down the hall, his movements smooth and unnatural. He paused at a window overlooking the city, his head tilted slightly, as if listening. His face remained a frustrating, terrifying blur. I checked the live camera feed from my phone, standing right in front of the monitor. He was on the screen, but the hallway on my phone's camera view was completely empty. He only existed inside the closed-circuit system. The tension became a physical presence in the security office. I was barely sleeping. Every flicker of a light on the console made me jump. Then he started to appear on multiple cameras at once. At 2:17 a.m. I'd see him on the 5th floor, the 15th, and the 25th simultaneously. 3 identical figures in 3 different locations, all moving in perfect, eerie sync. Each night he got a little closer to the camera lens. The blurred oval of his face filled more of the screen, a faceless void drawing nearer. The building itself started to react to him. On whatever floor he appeared, the lights would flicker. Computers at nearby desks would boot up on their own, their screens casting a pale, ghostly light on the empty chairs. The temperature in my security office would plummet the moment he appeared on screen. It was no longer a passive haunting. He was interacting, affecting the physical environment from inside the digital world. The horror was becoming personal. One morning, after a particularly bad night where he spent the entire time staring directly into the camera on the 32nd floor, I got up from my chair to start my end-of-shift checks. Something pricked my leg. I looked down, and there, on the worn fabric of my chair, was a small, gray button. It was smooth, cool, and made of a material I'd never seen before. The exact color of his suit. I had never seen it before in my life. I hadn't had any visitors. My neat, logical world was crumbling around me, and no one believed it. Henderson put me on a final warning. I had 1 week left. The final night arrived. I was a wreck, fueled by coffee and raw fear. I sat there watching the clock tick towards 2:17 a.m., but this time it was different. At 2:17 a.m., every single monitor went black. All 40 floors, 100 different cameras, all dead. The only light was the emergency power indicator on my console. My heart felt like it was going to explode. The silence was heavier, more profound than ever before. Then, I heard a sound. A soft whirry, mechanical sound was coming from the security printer, a dusty old machine we hadn't used in years. It wasn't even connected to the CCTV system. Slowly, a single sheet of glossy photo paper began to emerge. I watched, mesmerized and horrified, as an image resolved itself under the dim emergency light. It wasn't a grainy screen grab, it was a crystal-clear high-resolution photograph, a close-up of the man's blurred face, and in the dark, dead reflection of his non-existent eyes, I could see myself. I was slumped forward, asleep at my security desk. It was an impossible image, taken from an impossible angle. It was taken from inside my own monitor. He wasn't in the building. He was in the system, the network, the wires, the code. And he was learning, interacting, focusing on me. I didn't even wait for my shift to end. I grabbed my coat, left my keys and badge on the desk, and walked out of the Granville Tower without looking back. I never spoke to Henderson again. I moved to a new city, got a new job, a new life. I tried to bury the memory of the man in the gray suit. For 6 months, it worked. The silence returned. And then last night, My phone buzzed. It was an email. The sender was a garbled string of text, but I recognized the domain name Granville Tower --internal. The building's defunct, old server. The email was sent at exactly 2:17 a.m. There was no subject, no body text, just a single attachment, a video file. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely tap the screen it opened. The video was grainy, shot from a high corner. It showed the empty lobby of a building I had never seen before. Then I realized it was the lobby of my new workplace. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Stay safe out there. Story number 6. My name is Priya, and I'm telling you this because I need someone to believe me. It all started with the house. It was our dream home, a 2-story Victorian with a wraparound porch in a huge backyard, tucked away on a quiet tree-lined street. We got it for a steal. Now I know why. The first day, while unpacking boxes in the kitchen, I found it. A small, yellowed index card sitting right on the butcher block counter. The handwriting was a shaky, spidery scroll. It said, "Do not let the children play near the willow after dark." We laughed about it. My husband, Sam, and I didn't have any children, and the magnificent tree in our backyard, the one whose branches framed our bedroom window perfectly, was a cherry tree, not a willow. We figured it was just a leftover note from the previous owners, a quirky little piece of the house's history. We tucked it into a drawer and forgot about it. Or we tried to. A week later the strangeness began. It started with Sam. I woke up around 3 a.m. to find his side of the bed empty. I found him standing on the back porch, staring out at the cherry tree, his back to me. He was fast asleep. I gently guided him back to bed, and in the morning, he didn't remember a thing. But it happened again the next night, and the night after that. He'd always end up on the porch, facing the tree. Sometimes he'd mutter in his sleep, the same phrase over and over, the woman's roots. It was unsettling, but we brushed it off as stress from the move. Then came his nightmares. He'd thrash in his sleep, a sheen of cold sweat on his forehead. But when he woke up, gasping for air, he could never recall what he'd been dreaming about. He just knew it was terrifying. One Saturday, while I was trying to plant some flowers near the base of the cherry tree, my trowel hit something strange in the soil. I dug around and pulled out clumps of what looked like long, dark, fibrous hair. It was coarse and strong, tangled with the tree's roots. It felt disturbingly human. I threw it away, my hands trembling, and told myself it was just some kind of strange fungus. That was the final straw for Sam. "The tree has to go," he said, his voice firm. "I don't care how beautiful it is. It's doing something to me," I agreed. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like we were sharing it with something unseen. We called a local arborist, an old weathered man named Mr. Abernathy, when he came to look at the tree. His face grew grim. "You sure you want to take this one down?" he asked, running a hand over the bark. "Some trees are better left alone. They're anchors." His choice of words sent a shiver down my spine, but Sam was adamant. Mr. Abernathy reluctantly agreed, scheduling the removal for the following week. The day the tree came down, I felt a profound sense of relief. The sound of the chainsaw jarring, but with every branch that fell, it felt like a weight was being lifted from our home. That night, for the first time in weeks, Sam slept peacefully. We woke up the next morning feeling refreshed, hopeful. We'd won, we'd taken back our home. We spent the day cleaning up the last of the sawdust and planning where to put a new patio. For the first time, we felt truly happy in our new house. That night, the relief shattered. The silence of the house was broken by a sound that made my blood run cold. It was the sound of wet, heavy footsteps, squelching on the hardwood floors downstairs. They started at the back door, leading from the yard, and slowly, deliberately, began to ascend the stairs. Sam and I lay frozen in bed, our hearts pounding in our chests. The air grew thick with the smell of damp soil and rot, the smell of a freshly dug grave. The footsteps stopped right outside our bedroom door. We held our breath, waiting. Nothing. After what felt like an eternity, the sun began to rise, and a fragile sense of safety returned. When we finally mustered the courage to leave the room, we saw them. A trail of muddy bare footprints, unnaturally large and misshapen, leading from the back door, up the stairs, and ending right in front of our bedroom. But there were no footprints leading away. Whatever had come in was still inside. The phenomena escalated. We'd hear the sound of something heavy being dragged across the attic floorboards above us. Doors would creak open on their own, and that smell, that awful smell of wet earth and decay, would suddenly fill a room, suffocating and cloying, before vanishing as quickly as it came. We were living in a constant state of terror. We couldn't sleep. We could barely eat. We were prisoners in our own home. Desperate, I started digging. I spent hours at the local library, poring over town records and old newspapers. I found articles about the house, about its previous owners. Then I found a small piece in a century-old paper about a woman who had lived in our house. She'd lost her husband and children to a fever and, consumed by grief, had taken her own life in the backyard. The article was brief, but it mentioned a local legend, a superstition. They called her the widow. My heart stopped. The willow. The widow. It was a local term passed down and distorted over time. The note wasn't about a tree. It was a warning about a person, a spirit. I ran to our next-door neighbor, an elderly woman who had lived on the street her whole life. I showed her the note, my hands shaking. Her eyes widened in fear. "Oh dear God," she whispered. You didn't take down the old cherry tree, did you?" I nodded. "No, that tree wasn't the problem," she said, her voice trembling. "It was the anchor. It was the only thing keeping her roots in the ground, keeping her tied to that spot. You didn't cut down a tree. You set her free." The full horror of our mistake crashed down on me. The tree wasn't the source of the haunting. It was the cage. We hadn't banished the entity. We had released it. The sleepwalking, the mutterings about the woman's roots. Sam had been sensing it, the connection between the spirit and the tree. By cutting it down, we had severed her last tie to that specific patch of earth and given her dominion over the entire property, the whole house. That night, we didn't wait for the footsteps. As dusk fell, we threw woman the things into bags. Our movements frantic and clumsy. We had to get out. As we scrambled into the car, a cold rain began to fall. I looked back at the house, our dream home, now a monument to our ignorance, and then I saw it. In the living room window a shape was forming. It was a silhouette, blurry and indistinct at first, but slowly coalescing. It was made of mud and wet leaves and dark clinging soil, shaped into the form of a tall, gaunt woman. Rain-soaked and dripping, it pressed its muddy form against the glass, its featureless face turned toward us. It was no longer bound to the yard. The house was hers now, and she was free to roam her domain. We hit the gas and didn't look back. But even now, miles away, I can still feel her. I know she's there, in that house, waiting for the next family. Shay doesn't read the warning. Story number 7. Call me Ben, and until a few weeks ago I was the guy you'd call a professional skeptic. Ghosts, spirits, nah, just bumps in the night and overactive imaginations. So, when the local legend of Ravenswood Asylum essentially dared me to prove it wasn't haunted, I couldn't resist. The bet was simple, almost cliché: stay from midnight until 6 a.m. inside the abandoned treatment wing. Easy money, I thought. I wasn't going in blind. I brought the whole ghost hunting starter pack: multiple cameras, EMF meters, thermal imaging, a high-gain audio recorder. This wasn't a ghost hunt. It was a scientific debunking expedition. My plan was to sit back, record the profound silence, and collect my winnings in the morning. The first couple of hours were exactly as I predicted. Utter, deafening silence. The only sounds were the creaks of my own chair and the wind whistling through broken panes of glass. I even started a live stream narrating my boredom to a handful of night owl viewers. "See folks, nothing but dust and decay," I said with a smug grin, panning the camera across a corridor of peeling paint and overturned gurneys. It felt like a victory. I was winning. The silence was my proof. Then, just after 2 a.m., everything changed. A sound, a loud crackle of static, exploded from the asylum's ancient PA system. It was so sudden, so violent, it made me jump out of my skin. The speakers, which shouldn't have had power for 50 years, buzzed to life. A distorted metallic voice echoed through the halls, a voice that seemed to be synthesized from pure static and malice. "Subject Ben. Round 1. Begin." Before I could even process what I'd heard, it started. Bam! A heavy iron door at the far end of the hall slammed shut with concussive force. Then another, closer. Bam! And another. Bam! It wasn't random. It was a sequence, a rapid, terrifying pattern. Doors were slamming and locking all around me. A macabre game of musical chairs where I was the only player. My primary exit, the one I'd propped open, was the first to go. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't a draft. This was intentional. I was being herded. Panic set in, cold and sharp. I grabbed my camera and ran down the only corridor left open to me. The voice returned, its tone a cruel, electronic monotone. "Proceed to observation room." See, my scientific equipment was going haywire. The EMF meter was screaming, its needle pinned to the maximum reading. The thermal camera showed nothing but cold, empty space. My carefully planned investigation had devolved into a desperate flight for survival. As I was forced down a long, narrow hallway, the air grew thick and frigid. I was pushed towards a room with a shattered observation window. Inside, for just a fleeting second, a phantom scene played out. A translucent figure, a patient, was strapped to a chair, writhing as spectral orderlies held him down. It was gone in a blink, but the image was burned into my mind. This wasn't just a haunting, it was a reenactment. The asylum itself was the tormentor, and I was its new patient. The voice from the PA continued its cruel commands, guiding me through a labyrinth of terror. Subject shows signs of distress. Increased stimulus. The commands became more arbitrary, more sadistic. Crawl faster. I was forced into a small, claustrophobic room, the door slamming shut behind me. The walls were covered in frantic scratches. In the corner, another brief, horrifying vision flickered into existence. A patient in a straitjacket, banging his head against the padded wall until he just faded away. The ghostly thud echoed long after the image was gone. My gear was useless. The batteries in my cameras died simultaneously. My flashlight flickered and went out, plunging me into near-total darkness, relieved only by the faint moonlight filtering through grimy windows. I was alone, disarmed, and completely at the mercy of this malevolent intelligence. The game wasn't about scaring me anymore. It was about breaking me, just like the patients before me. The final command chilled me to the bone. Proceed to final therapy. Hydrotherapy awaits. I knew the stories. The hydrotherapy room was the most infamous part of Ravenswood. Tales of patients being held under freezing water or scalded by boiling jets were legendary. The last open door led right to it. I had no choice. The room was vast and tiled, a cavern of rust and decay. In the center sat a massive clawfoot tub, its porcelain stained a sickly brown. The air was heavy with the smell of mildew and something else, something metallic, like old blood. As I stepped inside, the iron door slammed shut with a deafening clang of finality. I was trapped. A low groaning sound began to reverberate through the room. It was the sound of ancient, rusty pipes shuddering to life. A single clear drop of water fell from a corroded faucet into the tub, then another, and another. The PA system crackled one last time. Session commencing. Countdown initiated. 10, 9, 8. Pure animal terror took over. This was it. I wasn't going to be just a witness, I was going to be a participant. While the countdown continued, my eyes darted around the room, searching for any way out. My gaze fell on a large window, boarded up with rotting planks of wood. It was my only chance. 7, 6, 5. I threw my whole body against the boards. Splinters dug into my shoulder. The wood groaned but held. I hit it again, fueled by adrenaline and the horrifying sound of water now gushing into the tub. 4, 3. The water wasn't just filling the tub. It was beginning to seep across the tiled floor, unnaturally cold, lapping at my shoes. With a final, desperate heave, one of the boards splintered and broke. I kicked and clawed at the opening, tearing my hands on rusty nails, not even feeling the pain. 2, 1. I tumbled out of the window, falling one story onto soft, muddy ground just as I heard a massive splash from inside the room. I didn't look back. I scrambled to my feet and ran. I ran through the overgrown grounds, not stopping until I reached the safety of my car, fumbling with the keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I drove away, leaving Ravenswood and its horrors in my rearview mirror. My skepticism. It wasn't just shattered, it was annihilated, reduced to dust. I'm left with a permanent chill in my bones that no blanket can warm, and a memory that plays on a loop in my nightmares. And the most unsettling part, when I finally got home and stepped out of my car, I saw them on the pavement, leading from my driver's side door. A trail of wet, water-damaged footprints, and they weren't mine. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've had an experience you can't explain, share it in the comments below. And if you want more true tales from the edge of belief, make sure to like and subscribe. Stay safe out there. Story number 8. My name is Maria, and until 6 months ago, I had a twin sister named Alina. When you're a twin, the bond isn't just something you can describe. It's not just being best friends or siblings. It's like sharing a single soul, split into 2 bodies. We finished each other's sentences, felt each other's pain from miles away. When she died in that car accident, it wasn't just grief I felt. It was a physical tearing, a fundamental part of my own being ripped away, leaving a void so cold and vast I thought it would swallow me whole. The silence in our shared apartment was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. In the first few weeks after the funeral, I started feeling her. Not in a metaphorical sense, but literally. I'd walk into the kitchen and smell her favorite lavender perfume, faint but unmistakable, even though I'd thrown her bottle away because seeing it hurt too much. I'd leave my coffee mug on the left side of the counter, get distracted by a phone call, and come back to find it moved to the right, exactly where she always insisted it belonged. At first, it was a profound comfort. It felt like she was still here, a guardian spirit watching over me, gently tidying up my life the way she always had. I'd whisper, "I miss you, Lena," into the empty air, and for a moment, the crushing weight of my loneliness would lift. But then, the comforting signs began to curdle into something else, something unsettling. The moved objects became more deliberate, more insistent. I'd come home to find every single drawer and cabinet in the kitchen slightly ajar, a nervous habit of hers when she was stressed. The temperature in the apartment started to fluctuate wildly, but only in specific spots. I'd be walking down the hallway and step into a pocket of air so cold it felt like walking into a freezer. A few steps later, it would be normal again. The gentle scent of lavender was replaced by the smell of damp earth and rain, the smell of the night she died. The feeling of a comforting presence morphed into the constant, prickling sensation of being watched. The first time I saw her, my heart nearly stopped. I was walking out of the bathroom toweling my hair, and there she was, standing at the far end of the hallway. It was Alina, my Alina, solid and real, wearing the gray sweater she loved. For a split second an impossible joy surged through me, but then I saw her face. It was my face, of course, but it was wrong. Her eyes, which used to sparkle with mischief, were hollow and wide with a frantic, desperate energy. She wasn't smiling. She was just staring at me, her expression one of pure terror. And she was shaking her head, a slow, deliberate no. I blinked, and she was gone. I tried to rationalize it. Grief, I told myself. It plays tricks on the mind. I was exhausted, not eating, not sleeping. It had to be a hallucination, but it happened again and again by the front door, in the reflection of the darkened living room window. Each time, she looked more solid, more real, and more terrified. She never spoke. She just stared at me with my own eyes, filled with a panic I couldn't comprehend, and shook her head. No, 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 it finally clicked, with a cold dread that seeped into my bones. She wasn't my guardian spirit. She wasn't watching over me. She was trying to warn me. My unease spiraled into genuine fear. I started researching. I dove into local history, old newspapers, anything I could find about our pre-war apartment building. I felt like a madwoman chasing a ghost through microfilm and dusty archives, but Elena's pleading face was burned into my mind. I didn't know what I was looking for until I found it. A small buried article from 50 years ago. Tragedy strikes twin sisters. The headline read, "Anna and Eva. They lived in my building, my apartment. Anna disappeared without a trace. The police suspected foul play, a known predator in the area who targeted young women, but they never found her body. They never had enough evidence to convict him for Anna's disappearance. The other twin, Eva, the one left behind, lived the rest of her life as a recluse in this very apartment, dying of old age, utterly alone." The article said neighbors described her as being in a state of perpetual terror, a woman haunted by silence. The night it all came together was the anniversary of Elena's death. I was in bed, unable to sleep, staring at the ceiling when the room grew ice. I turned my head, and she was right there, next to my bed, so close I could have reached out and touched her. Her form was flickering slightly, like a bad projection, but her face was clearer than ever. Tears were streaming from her hollow eyes. Her mouth opened, and for the first time, a sound came out. It wasn't her voice. It was a dry, rasping whisper, like wind through dead leaves. "He thinks I'm you," she rasped, the sound tearing at the silence. "He thinks you're me. He's coming back tonight. He always comes back for the other one." And then I heard it. Footsteps, methodical, heavy footsteps, starting their ascent on the main staircase from the ground floor. My blood turned to ice. The same pattern, Elena's whisper, echoed in my head, a memory that wasn't mine. From all those years ago, panic, pure and primal, seized me. I scrambled out of bed, shoving my heaviest furniture against the front door, my hands shaking so hard I could barely get a grip. I wedged a chair under the knob, my breath coming in ragged sobs. The footsteps stopped, right outside my door. Silence, a long drawn-out silence that was worse than the footsteps. I held my breath, listening. My entire world shrunk to that single wooden door. There was no knock, no voice, just a soft rhythmic scratching, the sound of a fingernail, maybe, tracing the outline of the doorframe. Slowly, methodically, it went on for what felt like an eternity. This wasn't a ghost. It wasn't the spirit of the murderer. It was his echo. His obsession. A psychic scar left on this place, a predatory pattern doomed to repeat itself on the anniversary. He was looking for Anna, and he had found Alina. Now he was looking for me. The scratching stopped. I waited, flattened against the wall, until the first gray light of dawn crept through the windows. The oppressive cold in the apartment lifted. The presence was gone. I'm still in this apartment. I can't leave. I can't abandon her. Alina is still here. I see her sometimes, a flicker in the corner of my eye. Her terror has subsided, replaced by a deep, heartbreaking sorrow. She didn't save me, not really. She just delayed the inevitable. The cycle is in motion. The story of the twin girls in my apartment building didn't end 50 years ago. I am now the surviving twin, and my sister's spirit is trapped here with me, forever standing watch, forever trying to protect me from a horror that will return. Thank you so much for spending this time with me and sharing in these truly terrifying accounts. If these stories made you check the shadows in your room, please let me know by giving this video a like. It helps more than you know. If you want to join me for more journeys into the unbelievable, please subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. I have so many more real encounters to share with you. Until next time, stay curious, and maybe leave a light on.
And that brings us to the end of another tale from the Oasis. We hope you enjoyed this journey into the extraordinary. Here at Narrative Oasis, we're dedicated to bringing you the most captivating stories for your pleasure. And trust me, the adventure is far from over. There are many more tales waiting to be told. If you're hungry for more thrills and excitement right now, be sure to check out our previous video. You won't be disappointed. To make sure you don't miss what's coming next, hit that like button, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel to stay connected. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in the next story.